Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, we ask that you kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices or place them on silent. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. A loving husband and partner, father, stepfather, brother, grandfather, businessman, dear friend to so many, Philadelphia sports fan, and so much more. The loss of Gary Freedman is felt deeply by those who loved him in life and those whom he loved. Gary, I learned, was a strong personality who built quite a life for himself. I didn't know him in life, only coming into contact with his being upon news of his passing. And I spent some time with his family, though, who shared with me with open hearts about the man that he was. I learned about his love of cars, particularly Corvettes, and how he would attend Cars and Coffee to say, I have a classic Lincoln, and I wonder if our paths ever crossed at these Cars and Coffees or car shows. I learned about his love of travel alongside his wife and partner of 35 years, Hannah, their trips to Atlantic City, walking the boards and seeing shows, and also traveling the world. His love of the movies and watches and seeing shows and photo albums and cars and the many businesses he started. A fruit stand at Reading Terminal, a glass business, stocks, real estate, and more. I learned that he certainly was not a wallflower, but you're going to hear more about his life and about the love that he shared with his family, those who knew him best in life, shortly as they offer eulogies, hespeds, to raise up his kavod, his honor, and his best qualities as we hold his memory in our hearts and minds today. Welcome. I'm Rabbi Nathan Weiner. I'm a rabbi locally here in South Jersey, and it's an honor, truly, on behalf of myself, my family, the Jewish people, to be present here with each of you today. So we extend greetings not only to those gathered here in the chapel today, but also to those joining us remotely on the live stream. Welcome. Your presence is felt in this chapel as well and is deeply appreciated by the family as we once again raise up Gary's life and his memory together in real and virtual community today. Jewish tradition teaches that while the physical body is temporary, the soul is eternal. And today, we gather for sacred purpose to pray for the full and complete rest for Gary's body. We focus on the fact that his soul, even in death, remains bound to the bond of life, to each of you, and we seek blessings for the continued elevation of his soul. May our time together today have purpose, may it hold deep meaning, and may it honor Gary's memory well. He is survived by his loving wife, Hannah, his daughter, Stephanie, and her husband, Alex, his stepdaughter, Deborah, and her husband, Peter, his grandchildren, Austin, Allison, Alex, Nicholas, and Brandon, all of whom I learned he was especially proud. His sister Judy and her husband John, and his brother-in-law and sister-in-law Gerson and Barbara. I pray I got every name correct. All right, good. It's my prayer for you also that your love and care and support for one another, God willing, carry you through this difficult loss and transition. So today, the goal for our time together is multifold. We have 2 mitzvot, commandments that we're going to fulfill together today. The first is called Kavod Hamet, honoring the deceased. And for most of our ceremony today, we keep our intention on Gary's honor and memory. Closer to the conclusion graveside, we transition to forming a community of consolation for the mourners as they recite for the first time the mourner's Kaddish. It's customary at moments of loss and grief across the Abrahamic faith traditions to share Tehillim, to share Psalms. And I'm going to share Psalm 23, a psalm used universally at moments like this of loss and of grief. I'll read it first in the Hebrew, followed by a standard translation in the English. And if you're comfortable and wish to in either language, you're welcome to say it with me. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, bin otesha yarbitzeni al mei menuchoti nahaleni, nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek lema'an shemo, gam ki elech b'getzel mavet lo irara ki ata imadi, shivtecha u'mishantecha hema yenachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai, dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya, ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen v'amen. From Kohelet Ecclesiastes, for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what has been planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time for silence and a time for speaking. Now is one of those times for speaking, as I welcome Gerson up, who's going to share some words and then invite members of the family up to share their hespeds, their words of honor in memory of Gary.
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Gerson, Hannah's brother, Gary's brother-in-law. It was March 15th or 16th in 1989 when I first met Gary. My wife had suddenly died, and Gary flew with Hannah to San Francisco the very next day to support me and my girls. I remember 2 things about Gary that stayed with me throughout the next 35 years of our relationship. Even in my grief, I recognized how unexpected and generous it was for him to accompany Hannah on this trip. He had just started dating her. Not exactly the kind of thing a guy does at the very start of a relationship. This commitment to family was a side of Gary that revealed itself to me right away. Here's another side of Gary I learned about during that first encounter. He had told me that he had just been diagnosed with hypertension and that he wasn't taking his medication for this because, quote, those doctors don't always know what they're doing. He very well knew that I was one of those doctors, and I made a mental note to myself that this is a guy who likes to be in total control of his experiences. And that turned out to be a defining characteristic of Gary, for the better and for the worse. I bet everybody in this room knows that Gary was smart and proficient in so many areas of life. He had broad and deep knowledge of all those subjects that he took the time to explore, and there were many, some of which you already heard, and you'll hear more of. When he sold insurance, he mastered that arena. When he owned a produce stall at the Reading Terminal, he aced it. When he owned a car lot, he learned how to buy and sell cars and fell in love with cars. We all know about his deep love and knowledge of those cars, old and new. I went to many car shows with Gary, and he taught me to appreciate the beauty and the craftsmanship of cars. He learned about watches and has an incredibly beautiful and extensive collection of watches. He collected coins and became an expert in that. And of course, you all know about his glass art business that thrived. He loved and appreciated the beauty of the glass art and had a wonderful collection of pieces that he told me only those pieces that spoke to him. Because of his broad knowledge of real estate, he also had a collection of rental units and houses over the years that brought him a lot of joy as well as a lot of headaches. I'm not going to go on any further about others, but do know that there's lots more. As we all know, Gary suffered with many awful medical issues for the past couple of years, and we all saw how his ability to engage in this full life was so diminished, bringing so much pain to himself and his loved ones. Despite the last few hard years, what I'll remember about Gary is how his face lit up when he talked about those things that brought him joy, especially his family. I'm now going to ask my wife, Barbara, to come up and say a few words.
Hi, I'm Barbara Kaplan. I'm so glad to see you all. We're all made of millions of different parts, and I bet everyone here knew a different part of Gary. There was a lot about Gary that I never got to know, but I did know the part of him that was no nonsense, no BS, spunky, straight from the hip. And being a Bronx girl, I always appreciated that about him. I also knew some parts of him that could be tender and vulnerable because he did open up himself to me at many tough moments during his illness, when he let me know how frightened and down he sometimes felt when his illness reared its ugly head. We all do our best to make sense of important things that happen in our lives. I bet we've all been trying to make sense of Gary's death. I know I have. I wouldn't for a moment pretend to have known Gary super well or what his thoughts or feelings were, but there's this image that has come into my own head as I've listened to Hannah and Debbie and Gerson, people who knew him better than I did. Here's the image, that Gary's illness was like a tsunami that came into his life and created such havoc that his life didn't look very much like the one he valued anymore. And the tsunami also seemed to crash into himself, this strong, capable, smart, multi-talented guy we've all known, left him feeling light years different than how he thought of himself. He tried so hard and for so long and so courageously to keep the tsunami at bay, to live with joy and dignity and meaning. And so many of us were rooting for him to find ways towards living with a kind of acceptance and to find joys that were possible for him, an unspeakably hard challenge for anyone with a serious illness, and a daunting challenge for Gary, despite how hard and bravely he tried, and despite all of our wishes for him. Gary's struggles with his illness happened in the midst of many blessings in his life, for which I know he was thankful, especially when he had some moments of relief from the great discomforts his illness brought. For instance, he had in Hannah the most wonderful and caring wife anyone could ever hope to have, a life partner who devoted so much of their shared life, and especially the last 1.5 years, to taking incredible care of him, putting her own needs on the side, the loving, devoted woman she is, to him and to so many of us. And the blessing of a spectacular and loving daughter in Stephanie, and an attentive, present, caring stepdaughter, Debbie, and Pete, who was often so helpful and caring to him, and a wonderful and loving sister, Judy, and the very special blessings of his grandchildren, who he adored, Austin, Allison, AJ, Nicholas, and Brandon. I know that all of you were super duper sparks of giant joy for him, and you all filled his heart up with so much pride and love. No matter how many different bewildering feelings we're all dealing with now, I bet everyone here feels super clear about one thing, that we all want to surround Hannah, Stephanie, Debbie, his grandkids, and Judy with all our love and support, each in our own unique, idiosyncratic ways. I have 3 wishes, which I guess you could call prayers. 1, I hope we can all find comfort that Gary's suffering is at an end. 2, I hope that this can be the end of a chapter of suffering for Hannah, Stephanie, for the whole family. And 3, I hope that soon there will be the start of a new chapter of replenishment and healing. Thank you.
Friendships were incredibly important to Gary, and he developed at least 3 lifelong friendships that I know about. Then there may be more that I don't. One of them, Mitch, had a tragic ending a couple of years ago. Another one, Rich, is here, and another lifelong friend. And then we'd like to hear from Mark. I don't know where Mark is, but there he is. So we're going to hear from Mark, who's going to have a few remarks about Gary.
How you doing? Been a while, huh? To Hannah, Stephanie, friends, and relatives, thank you, Hannah, for giving me the opportunity to say a few words today. I'll try to keep it short. If I was limited to just 6 words as to why we are here today, they would be, what a punch in the gut. My name is Mark Vunt. I met Gary in the late 1960s, around 68, 69. So we've known each other and we've been friends for over 50 years, if my math is correct. We went to Penn State together, although I remember he was not very happy living away. He wanted to be around his family and his friends. I know how much family meant to Gary and how often he enjoyed spending time with them. I can remember the excitement in his voice when he was going to Langhorne to visit his daughter and grandchildren. Needless to say, Gary and I went through the ups and downs, not with our friendship, but just with life in general. Although I do not know how many of you knew his friend Mitch, with Gersa just talked about. And some of you may, we recently shared the trauma of his tragic passing. Although Gary went to Penn State, he was really not a big Penn State sports fan. I took him to a Penn State football game in University Park about 2 years ago, and I have to say, he seemed less than enthralled to be there. But when his grandson, Nicholas, where's Nicholas? Is he here? Hi, Nicholas. Went to Penn State. All of a sudden, he couldn't get up there often enough to watch him play ice hockey. I assume you're still playing ice hockey for Penn State? Was that? Oh, okay. When we were up at the game, I actually did point out to Gary where the hockey rink was, because I don't even think he knew where that was. I even took him inside to show him what it looked like. It would be a rare day that Gary and I wouldn't talk about the stock market. Gary loved the stock market except when it went down. I tried to explain to him that that's the stock market, and guess what? It goes up and it goes down. But in the long run, it goes up, so don't panic, hang in there, you'll be fine. Earlier, he was more of a trader than investor, but it worked out well for him. Recently, however, he decided to let a brokerage house do his investing for him, which I thought was interesting but strange because I knew how much Gary loved doing it himself. Gary enjoyed traveling. When Gary had a home in Naples and I was in Fort Myers, we took a cruise together. I only bring it up because 2 days before he passed, he asked me about taking another trip together. As a matter of fact, I still have the last text I sent him, which said, "That's a good idea, I like it." To Hannah and Stephanie, before I conclude, I would like to leave you with a few hopefully inspirational words that perhaps you could take some solace from. Those we love don't go away. They walk beside us every day. Unseen, unheard, but always near. Still loved, still missed, and very dear. I will miss my friend, and as bad and as horrifying this whole thing is for all of us, I hope Gary has found peace for himself. Thank you.
Judy, Gary's sister, is going to be coming up next.
I just need a breath. I wasn't sure if I could do this without this. Oh, but this is a genetic thing that we're blessed from our family to have this level of sensitivity and love and caring of others, especially family. My brother and I were friends as children, and then our lives grew in different directions. I wasn't home very often. I was blessed to be an international flight attendant back in the early 70s. Gary went off and did his businesses. We grew apart, but then we grew back together as friends, as our mom had wished for us when she passed in 2012. And then we got close again. And Gary loved family, as Gerson and everyone has shared so far. He always talked about Hannah and Debbie and the boys, and they became his full life. And I was so happy that he had found this family that brought him so much joy and happiness. And Gary knew that my passion in life was a nonprofit organization that I started 30 plus years ago, making a difference with children and young adults and adults with special needs. Gary also knew that attending our annual gala was really important for he and Hannah to participate and share in what brought me love and happiness. And for John and I, when we met and got married around the same time Hannah met Gary, Gary was always there. He loved John, and he praised him all the time and said he and Pete, Debbie's husband, were very similar, wonderful men we were both blessed to have in our lives. And this past fall of 23, Gary had invited John and I to the house. He said that he wanted to share a lot of his art glass that he had collected, and he wanted to donate them to our fundraiser. And he literally stocked up my car with beautiful art that we were blessed to be able to sell on our fundraiser. And that made Gary so proud and so happy that he could support family once again. So thank you for letting me share and tell Gary I love him. And I hope he's at peace. I love you, Gary.
We're going to hear now from my niece, Hannah's daughter, Gary's stepdaughter, Debbie, who's going to say a few words, and then she's also going to speak a little bit for Stephanie, who has asked her to read something very special.
I want to say thank you to everyone for coming today. I know Gary would be so happy to see everyone here. He was really a person who enjoyed when people were around. He loved being with us at the house. He loved my boys, my husband, of course my mother, his daughter, Alex, AJ, Allie, and Austin. Again, I just want to say for everyone who's come here, I was telling people you don't have to come. We're not people that stand on ceremony. It does mean a lot to all of us. I know it's difficult with people working, taking time off, but Gary would be very glad that everyone did come here, so thank you so much. I met Gary when I was, I'm going to cry because I want to say thank you to him. I met him when I was 18. He's taking care of my mother. We sometimes did butt heads, I'm not going to lie. There were some parts of Gary that I wasn't 100% thrilled with, but then there were other parts that kind of made up for it. And I always say, my motto in life, you always focus on the positive, kind of minimize the negative. And he took care of my mom. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer 4 years ago. And the most incredible thing that he's done for me as an individual was be there for my mom every step of the way, every single step of the way. And he loved my mom so much. And even though they may have had some crazy times, there was one thing that we knew, no matter what, they loved each other so much. And he adored my mother. Every appointment, every time she had a scan, he sat there. He sat there with me when we waited for the results from each test that she had. When we held our breath, and I would look at him, and he would text me, and she's out of this, she's out of that. It was a very incredibly hard time that we both went through. And I think Gary and I bonded with that. I want to thank you, Gary, for being there for my mother throughout that entire process, for being with her all the time. There's nobody he would rather be with. In fact, I think some of their fights were because my mom is an independent woman. She was the type, I'll see you later. It's okay, I'll go here, I'll go there. She still is to this day. She's taught me how to be a very independent woman, which is very important to me. But I think Gary wanted her to be there all the time. And that may have been some of the reason for some of their fights. But in the end, he was there for her. And I just want to say thank you so much to him, because that was the greatest gift someone could do, was to help me. I'm an only child. I always say only child, only grandchild, and Jewish. How spoiled do you think I was growing up? That's my big joke, and I think everyone knows that. I was so blessed to have wonderful grandparents and my mother, of course, but being an only child means you can't be there all the time and do everything, and Gary was there for my mother and did so much. So again, I'm going to thank Gary so much. Stephanie has selected a poem, and she would like me to read it, so I apologize. It's on our phone, and if I can keep my hands straight, not from shaking, I'm going to read it. Stephanie, one other thing I want to acknowledge, where's Arnie? Arnie. I'm sorry Arnie wasn't listed in the initial speech from the rabbi. Arnie was more like a brother to Gary. Arnie is my mother's sister's, my mother's sister's husband. My aunt died several years ago, and Arnie and Gary were like brothers at the end. I think Arnie would say Gary helped him, and Gary enjoyed being with him. Gary was his buddy. They were very close friends, and I want to say, Arnie, thank you so much for being such a caring friend to him, and I'm sorry we didn't say your name initially. Okay. This is from Stephanie. He only takes the best unknown. God saw that he was getting tired. A cure was not to be. So he put his arms around him and whispered, "Come with me." With tearful eyes, we watched him suffer and saw him fade away. Although we loved him dearly, we could not make him stay. A golden heart stopped beating, hard-working hands to rest. God broke our hearts to prove to us he only takes the best. I want to thank Stephanie for selecting such a beautiful poem. Stephanie meant the world to him, as we have heard many times. Thank you again to everybody who has come. I do want to say Gary did try his best. He fought. He became to me the shell of the man that he was the last 6 months. My son was away for quite some time, as you know, and he would see him, and we talked and said, he doesn't talk as much as before. He didn't walk as quickly as before. Everything kind of slowed down. And Gary, to us, we will remember him being more of the type of bold personality he was. He certainly was. He fought as best as he could. We're happy that he is now at peace. We thank you all for being here, and our final goodbye to Gary. And thank you to my wonderful uncle for helping out with everything.
You heard a lot about how Gary loved his grandchildren, and 3 of them are going to come up and speak, one at a time. That was my direction. Stephanie and Alex have 3 incredibly wonderful young children, and we're going to go from youngest to oldest. So first we're going to hear from Austin.
I remember when me and AJ went in your car with the top down and had fun when we swam in your pool. I had lots of fun when we came to visit you at your house. And the most of all is how he loved me because I love him.
AJ, please come up.
It is a very sad day today because we have to say goodbye to my Pop-Pop Gary. He was very funny and very loving. I liked it when we went in his pool in the summer, going to Longwood Garden and going into his car with the top down. He always brought us out to lunch, and my favorite memory was how he loved me. Thank you.
Okay, and now Allie, please come up.
It is a sad day today where we have to say goodbye to my Pop-Up Gary. I will miss him so much, but I will always have great memories of him, such as playing with him in his pool in the summer, him coming to all of my birthday parties, him coming to my dance recitals. I also remember when he taught me how to snorkel, and the best of all, how he loved me. Thank you.
These speeches were copied, and Allie and Austin and AJ wanted a copy of those to go with Gary. So there are copies of them in the casket. Our final speaker is going to be Hannah, my sister, Gary's wife. Hannah, come on up.
I usually have never spoken at any kind of ceremony or a funeral. But I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. Gary would be so happy to see how many people loved him and cared about him. In the last months of his life, he tried to be courageous as possible, but the illness got to him, and he just couldn't be happy anymore. We tried to be normal as possible. We went to movies, we went to dinner, we went to our wonderful friends, Kenny and Marilyn. They invited us all the time down the shore. He's known them a long time, and they were just calling us all the time about how he was. And he just loved both of them. He talked to Richie all the time, his best friend, one of his best friends, and Mark. And he did the best. He did the best walking by counting steps. He tried to, sorry for me to say, many things like that. But he knew that the sickness was going to make him worse and worse, and he just couldn't go down that path, and he just couldn't suffer anymore. Please know that he never meant to hurt anyone. He loved the family. He loved his family so much, his grandchildren and daughter and Debbie and Pete, and loved all his friends too. I'm very grateful to have such wonderful friends and family. Thank you all so much for being by my side today and always.
With these thoughts and memories and dedications in mind, particularly for me, the thoughts of these three kids. It was so beautiful and moving and touching to hear from you. It's with these thoughts in mind that we move to the central prayer of a Jewish memorial service, El Malei Rachamim, which asks God to grant true rest for Gary's soul in the wings of God's divine presence. I'll read it first in the English, followed by chanting in the Hebrew. If it's comfortable physically for you to do so, I invite you to please rise. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of the divine presence in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as resplendence of the firmament to the soul of Gary Freedman, who has gone to his eternal home. For charity has been donated in remembrance of his soul. May his place of rest be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the All-Merciful One shelter him with the cover of God's wings forever and bind his soul to the bond of life. Adonai is his heritage. May he rest in his resting place in peace, and let us say, Amen. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Al Kanfei Hashchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tehorim, Kezohar harakia mazhirim. Et nishmat Gershon ben Avraham shehalach le'olamo. Ba'avor shenadvu tzadaka ba'ad hazkarat nishmato. Began Eden dehe menuchato. Lachen bal harachamim yastirehu beseter kenafav le'olamim. Vitzror bitzror hachayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato. V'yanuach al mishkavo b'shalom. Vinomar. Amen. Please be seated. Our time together here at the chapel is drawing to a close. Immediately following our time here, we'll make our way via processional for the interment at Crescent Memorial Park in Pennsauken. And immediately following interment, guests, family, and friends are welcome to join with the family for visits and a meal of consolation at Cafe Aldo Lamberti at Route 70 and Haddonfield Road in Cherry Hill. The family also asks that donations in lieu of flowers please be made to the American Diabetes Association at diabetes.org. Omar, Ladonai, Maxim, Haya Parko.